on how many simply still fair is to this one by one.
Good afternoon, everyone. The panelists who are joining. We will likely start in a few minutes. We're just waiting for one more panelist to join. And of course, for others too, especially the attendees and participants to keep flowing in. So yeah, that's what we are waiting for. Nice to see you, Theogene.
Hello.
Nice to see you, Ricky. I'm sure Emmanuel and Malaku. Hi, Jackie. Nice to see you. Hi, Emmanuel.
Hello. Hi, Brenda. Hi, everyone.
Hope everyone has had their lunch and is ready for the next 2.5 hours. Depending on where you are, I'm assuming you're in this time, Nairobi time zone. But Eugene, I'm assuming you're in Kigali.
Yes, I am.
Okay. I think we are slotted to likely start around 2:10 East African time. So I will wait for a signal from our coordinator on the other end.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Melaku. For those who are still joining or have just joined, we are going to be starting in roughly 5 minutes. So get a glass of water or a refreshment before we start our webinar. So we shall be starting in around 5 minutes or so. We're waiting for our panelists to settle in. So grab a water and thank you again for joining. We will be starting in roughly 5 or so minutes. Perfect. I see more people are trickling in. Again, grab a glass of water, be comfortable. We are about to start in 1 minute. Our panelists are here with us already, so they're also just settling in before we kick off official start of our webinar. And again, thank you so much for taking the time to register and to join us to learn more about school feeding and why MSMEs are important in the school feeding environment. So thank you once again for all those who have joined us today. So we will begin in a minute as we allow our panelists to settle in. Great. So we are kicking off our webinar. So good afternoon, good morning, and good evening. This is depending on what time zone you are in. I'd like to welcome you all to this very interactive and informative webinar on improving our children's nutrition. We will be focusing on why smallholder farmers and MSEs are at the heart of school meals provisioning. So as you know, for most of you who work within the food system space and specifically who are interested in the school feeding space, across the African continent, school feeding initiatives play a very vital role in improving nutrition for children, and this also boosts their attendance in school, has been seen to enhance their learning outcomes. So these school feeding programs are not just about providing meals, they're investments in the future, they drive educational success and also economic development. And this results in community well-being. Specifically in Kenya and Rwanda, school feeding programs are widely used to enhance food security and nutrition. But despite the great potential in transforming food systems and enhancing, the well-being of children, micro and small enterprises and smallholder farmers remain largely excluded from these programs. And this is largely because of limited access to procurement mechanisms and also, of course, the inadequate policy frameworks. So the enabling environment is not ripe to allow MSEs and smallholder farmers to adequately work within the school feeding procurement mechanisms. So today we are honored to bring together experts, policymakers, and also micro and small enterprises and practitioners who are the forefront of this particular mission. We will also explore what the impact of school feeding is. Smallholder farmers and MSEs remain underrepresented in school feeding and supply chains, and we want to understand why this is so. We also want to look at how can we strengthen their inclusion, which could significantly enhance food security, and in turn stimulate local economies and ensure the sustainability of school feeding initiatives. So this webinar is being hosted by two organizations, the African Population and Health Research Center, APHRC, and Wasafiri Consulting. These two organizations, in partnerships with Imperial College of London and also with the University of Rwanda, are implementing partners of the IDRC funded research project called Leveraging School Feeding and Micro and Small Enterprises to promote access to healthy and sustainable food among the urban poor in Kenya and Rwanda. So my name is Brenda Mareri, and I work as a senior manager of the food systems portfolio at Wasafiri Consulting. And I will be moderating this particular event. And as we invite speakers and panelists to speak, I encourage you all to put your questions in the chat box, and we shall address them during our Q&A session. So thank you once again for joining us in this very crucial conversation. So let's get started. To kick us off, I would like to invite our keynote speaker. Sadly, we could not be joined by Dr. Samrat, who was to be our original keynote speaker, who works with the Imperial College of London due to an emergency. But we have our very able Dr. Theogene Lusingizimana. Dr. Theogene will be giving us our keynote presentation for today. And he is a researcher and senior lecturer at the University of Rwanda. And he has particular interest in multidisciplinary research to inform policies in agriculture, food systems, nutrition, and health. Dr. Theogene will be giving us an overview of what homegrown school feeding programs look like in Africa, with a major focus on Kenya and Rwanda. What is homegrown school feeding? Why is this an important approach? And what are the models that exist that strengthen school meals programs and in turn strengthen local communities and businesses? So Dr. Theogene, I'd like to invite you onto the platform to give us your keynote presentation. Thank you so much. Over to you, Dr. Theogene.
Thank you, Brenda. Thank you, everyone who has joined, and you are welcome. So good afternoon and good evening, depending on wherever you are. Trying to share my presentation, and I would ask you to let me know if you can see my presentation. Just a minute. Well, can you see my presentation, Brenda?
Yes, very clear.
Good. Thanks again for the invitation and for the, organizing this webinar. I will be mainly talking about Rwanda's experience in school feeding. I have a few slides, and I will also share my my research experience, some findings from the current project and the other project if I have enough time. So first of all, school feeding programs are implemented or developed in different contexts. For Rwanda, we are talking about the context of hunger and undernourishment, food insecurity, and limited access to healthy diets, which contribute to a high level of food insecurity. For instance, some recent statistics show that 20% of households in Rwanda are classified as food insecure. This means that even children in those households will have to struggle to get food. And so this again, we'll talk about the role of school feeding program and how this benefits such children. Stunting rates, 33%, although this is a significant, it's an alarming number, but looking at where Rwanda comes from, it's a significant progress because I'm looking at 2015 where we had close to 40% of children under the age 5 who were stunted. So there is some progress in stunting reduction. We are also talking about the context related to the widespread of micronutrient deficiencies. Most of the time, we have data on anemia, but we also have statistics from general population showing that many of our people do not achieve their recommended intake in terms of micronutrients, and they are really struggling to meet their recommendations. So, school feeding programs have several objectives. As you know, it's about improving education. It's about improving children's health and nutritional status. It's also about improving agricultural productivity. So it has a significance in terms of local food systems and also providing safety net for children, especially those that are coming from a poor household and food insecure household. So multiple objectives, which also speaks to the multiple sectoral approach when it comes to implementing this type of programs. So in our journey, I would say that Rwanda's school feeding program has started a long time ago, even before 2010. But if I try to put it on this timeline, I would say that officially, the first, one of the school feeding programs implemented in Rwanda, which is called 1 cup of milk per child or school milk program, was launched in 2010. And in 2014, there was a national school feeding, expansion of the national school feeding program in boarding schools. So it was, from boarding schools to secondary day schools. Before, I want to mention that it was only boarding school students who were fed at school, but this program was extended to day schools in 2014. And one of the key events or key reports that have also shaped Rwanda's school feeding journey is the World Bank's Human Capital Index report in 2018, which showed that 63% of our children's potential are lost just because of poor nutrition, so stunting, and the poor access to healthcare and limited education. And this has also changed national, national mechanisms to try to find out how to address this challenge. So in 2019, there was a development of a comprehensive school feeding policy. And in the same year, there was an establishment of National School Feeding Technical Working Group. And in 2020, the budget to implement the policy was approved. And then there was a government commitment to scale up the implementation of a school feeding program. So we have three school feeding programs, unlike most of the countries, maybe in the region or worldwide. We have 1 cup of milk per child, which is fully funded by the government and implemented through the National Child Development Agency. And it targets pre-primary and the primary grade 1 schools, and it serves milk twice a week. The second one is the National School Feeding Program, which is also a government-funded program with parents' contributions. So this is what we call National School Feeding Program in general, and it targets public and government-aided secondary school and boarding school, day and the boarding schools. Then you have another one, which is supported by the World Food Program, which is what we call homegrown school feeding program. This one was launched in 2022 as a result of food insecurity, which affected the southern part of eastern and southern part of Africa. And it provides meal to 140 schools in most food insecure districts. So basically, we have three programs, three school feeding programs, and 2 of them are government-supported programs. Another one is supported by the WFP. So how are school feeding programs managed and implemented in Rwanda? So we have a strong mechanism to manage and implement school feeding programs in Rwanda. So we have a central level, which is the national level, where we have 2 committees, 1 committee and 1 technical working group. So we have a national steering committee, which is made by 16 ministries. The MINEDIC, Ministry of Education, is the lead agency, and the other 6 development partners. We also have a national school feeding technical working group, which includes ministries, donors, and the University of Rwanda is also represented. Then at district level, we have a district school feeding committees. Then at the sector level, we have a school feeding program coordination team. And then at the lowest level, which is a school, we have 2 committees, school feeding committee and the school feeding tender committee. So through these mechanisms, school feeding programs are well managed, and this also has to do with the how improving efficiency in the implementation of the programs. So a few words about the trends in coverage. So recent data indicate that school children who were fed at school increased from 23% in 2020. So this is when the national budget was approved to implement the National Comprehensive School Feeding Program. So it increased from 23% to 86% in 2021-2022 school year. Of course, with the plans to achieve universal coverage. And then the number of schools providing meals also increased from 60% in 2020 to 82% in 2021 or 2022 school year. And the most recent data indicated that about 4 million school children, which represent 92% of school children, were receiving their meal at school. So what is the role of medium and small enterprise and the smallholder farmers in school feeding programs in Rwanda? So these are a few our key findings from our desk review. In Rwanda, just as in many other low and mid-income countries, micro and small enterprises and smallholder farmers, they play a crucial role in the supply of food. And to give you some data, we have data indicating that more than 70% of our farmers are classified as smallholder farmers. So in terms of food production, in terms of food marketing, in terms of processing, so they are really key in terms of food supply. So school feeding program guidelines in Rwanda require that schools prioritize the purchase of locally produced food from local smallholder farmers and the farmer cooperatives. And this is to encourage local economic development. And our data show that many national policy documents and the guidelines related to school feeding program, I'm talking about policies in education, policies in agriculture, social safety net policies, and the other policies, they explicitly mention the role of SMEs in school food provision. Unfortunately, I found that individual smallholder farmers do not engage directly with school feeding programs. Basically, what this means is that most smallholder farmers, they engage not as entrepreneurs who want to leverage the school feeding as a market, but as parents who are fulfilling their responsibilities to provide food to their children. Also, we found that both SMEs and large-scale business are not really interested in school feeding programs because they don't see as attractive markets for their produce or for what they are selling. And this is due to the current procurement mechanisms, which tend to hinder their participation. Some of the key challenges include limited budgets, because a bulk of school feeding financing is provided by households. So we are talking about 2/3 of school feeding program financing, and the rest is covered by the government. You can understand that people will still struggle and schools will struggle to get food, especially when these households, when parents do not or have not ability to contribute. So limited availability of healthy foods and the food prices fluctuations. This is also one of the challenges. And another challenge is the high reliance on biomass fuel, because data indicate that is more than 95% of schools rely on firewood or charcoal for cooking. And we understand that this will undermine the agricultural sustainability or even school feeding sustainability. But there are some initiatives that are trying to address some of these challenges. One is I just decided to talk about these three. One is the Rockefeller Foundation funded initiative, which aims to provide to improve the quality of school meals by replacing refined maize flour with a fortified whole grain. I guess this program is implemented in different countries in the region, including Burundi, and I guess Kenya as well. You will correct me if I'm wrong. There is also there are other projects that seek to leverage school gardens to produce nutrient-rich foods that can supplement school meals. So here I would like to also mention that we recently conducted a landscaping analysis of biofortification, and we found that school meals, school feeding programs can be an entry point to introduce nutrient-rich foods such as biofortified foods. And I would say that I'm happy that the Ministry of Agriculture, in collaboration with the Global Alliance for Improved Nutrition, has started to implement some of the recommendations from our analysis related to introducing biofortified foods into school meal programs. Another initiative is the integration of pre-cooked beans to reduce biomass fuel consumption or dependency. However, one of the companies, I would say it's a middle-scale company, is trying to supply pre-cooked beans to schools in some of the districts in the southern province, and they are looking forward to expanding this to other districts. So as a conclusion, presentation was really short. So there has been a significant progress made in Rwanda to expand coverage of a school feeding program. So you have seen where we came from 23% to more than 80% of children benefiting from school meals in one single school year. And this reflects the government's strong commitment to integrate the school feeding program into its broader national development framework. For your information, I also wanted to mention that the current national program for, national transformation, the NST number 2, which is the development program, which is a 5-year development program, also recognize school feeding program as an entry point to improve nutrition of children and also reduce stunting. There are also several sector policies which recognize the critical role of school feeding programs in promoting sustainable food systems and local economic development. And one of the recent development is the establishment of development of new school feeding financing strategy, which is being currently implemented to address some of the challenges that I mentioned, including financing. So with this, I would say that it's the end of my presentation, and I will be looking forward to the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Theogene. I think really insightful presentation regarding, homegrown school feeding and how this is being implemented in the Rwandan context. And just to highlight that this is part of a series of webinars that we will be hosting focused on school feeding programs. And we will be getting more in-depth analysis and information on also school feeding programs in Kenya. And during the panel discussions, we will have our panelists also touching on the Rwandan, Ethiopian, and Kenyan context. So do stay tuned and do keep this bookmarked in your calendars to really join us in all our other series of webinars. So thank you again, Dr. Theogene. I think you highlighted something quite important when it comes to school feeding. It is a multi-sectoral approach. So there is a requirement for many ministries and many stakeholders to come together to really ensure school feeding works. And it's very interesting to see how in Rwanda, there is quite a heavy support from the government, and structures have been put in place from national to sub-national levels to ensure school feeding is being implemented. And one thing that you mentioned that is very noteworthy is that school feeding programs are not only looking at ensuring there's meal provisioning at the school level, but these are also pathways for commercializing biofortified crops and really increasing nutrition status for children and the meals that they consume at the school level. And this might cascade at the home level as well. And moving into the space of also offering climate smart school meals, for example, the pre-cooked beans. So I think what you've mentioned here is that homegrown school feeding is a pathway not only for school meal provisioning, but also touching on how do we address, the aspect of climate change, the aspect of nutrition, and also commercializing products that have heavy nutritional value. So I encourage you all to put your questions in the chat box. If they're directed to Dr. Theogene, he will be part of our expert panel discussion, and he will be able to touch on some of the questions that you might have regarding his presentation. But I think Dr. Theogene, something that we could touch on a bit more before we get into the panel discussion, as you've mentioned. Could you highlight a bit more around, you mentioned that within the homegrown school feeding context, most of the farmers do not see this as an attractive route to engage in terms of growing, particularly to produce for schools. So, and it's not attractive because of the procurement systems that are in place. So could you touch on a bit from the Rwandan context? What is the government, what are schools doing? Some examples of how are we creating spaces for the school procurement systems to be more attractive and to be more inclusive of farmers, not only as parents who are providing for their children within the schools, but as a business that would be profitable and scalable.
Thank you, Brenda. What I mentioned is that school feeding programs are not attracting markets, and this is true. And one of the reasons is that parents and smallholder farmers and also other business, be it small scale businesses or large scale businesses, they don't see this as attractive markets because when it comes to payment, for instance, some of the mechanisms in the current procurement mechanism is that they have to pay some taxes on what they sell to schools. And if they don't pay taxes on what they sell, it's the responsibilities of the schools to calculate and pay the taxes, because they have to show that they have paid those taxes. So for schools, it is difficult to deal with the smallholder farmers, individual families, individual farmers who are bringing food. It's also difficult for cooperatives or even large-scale businesses because they have to through a lengthy process and the bureaucratic processes to get those taxes paid and also get even their payment. So I think that's what I wanted to highlight to answer your question. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dr. Theogene. I think that really is at the heart of our discussion. How do we help farmers create systems that allow them to adequately participate in school procurement systems? Because these are the hurdles that they have to face. There are policy aspects, there are economic aspects that touch on taxes. So how do we help our SMEs, MSEs, and farmer associations or just smallholder farmers to create systems that allow them to adequately participate? So again, thank you so much, Dr. Theogene. And to our participants, if you have any questions directed to Dr. Theogene, kindly put them in the chat. He is still here. He will be part of our panel discussion. So we will hear quite a bit more from Dr. Theogene regarding how school feeding is being implemented in Rwanda, what are the hurdles, what are the challenges, and what are the successes that they have seen. So thank you again, Dr. Theogene, for that very insightful presentation. So we still have a very, very exciting lineup of panelists who are here to speak to us around what their experiences are in the school feeding space and how we can actually transform the food system space using school feeding as a conduit to success. So for the next 1 hour, we will be having an exciting panel discussion. And Dr. Theogene's presentation was a great springboard into this particular panel discussion. We have 6 panelists with us who will touch on 5 main areas of concern. What are the existing school feeding models in Rwanda, in Ethiopia, and we will touch on what's going on in Kenya as well. How is school feeding a conduit for food systems transformation? Because from Dr. Theogene's presentation, we saw that there are very many aspects that school feeding touches on, and not only school meals provisioning. How do we strengthen how MSMEs involve themselves in school feeding procurement systems, really to strengthen that homegrown school feeding model for sustainability? How do complementary schools engage in the school feeding environment, and what is their importance within the school feeding environment? And of course, how do we ensure sustainability of school feeding programs? Key is to have national or government involvement and support. So those are very important areas that we want to touch on during this very exciting panel discussion. We shall have roughly 10 minutes for each panelist to share their extra thoughts and views. And I'd like to introduce our 6 panelists. So we do have Dr. Theogene Dusingizimana from the University of Rwanda, who just gave us his keynote speech. We will also have Melaku Chakol. He is an advisor in the School of Health and Nutrition Coordination Arm within the Regional Health Bureau of Addis Ababa. We also have Dr. Jacqueline Kulu from APHRC. She is a research scientist focused on maternal, child, and adolescent nutrition. We also have Ricky Aguda. He is a senior food systems consultant at Wasafiri. We'll also have Emmanuel Atamba. He's a senior advisor in the food systems arm within TMG, which is a think tank for sustainability. And of course, we have the Director of Nutrition and Wellness School Feeding Program, which is Dishina County, Esther Mugusu. So we have a very exciting lineup of panelists who have quite a vast experience within the school feeding space, who will be touching on those main areas that we do want to hear from in terms of school feeding. So without much ado, I'd like to invite Melaku to give us his thoughts around, what is Ethiopia's model around school feeding programs? How is Ethiopia implementing the homegrown school feeding program? What is the role of government and community, and also the smallholder farmers themselves? And what are some of those lessons we could learn from how Ethiopia is implementing its school feeding models? So over to you, Melaku. Melaku, if you're speaking.
Okay, yes, thank you.
We hear you now.
Thank you. I was just trying to make active my audio, or just to.
Yes, we hear you now.
Can you? This was just to unmute my audio. Okay, thank you for the opportunity just to say something about the school feeding program in the context of Ethiopia. And before I proceed to this, the point regarding the school feeding program, I need to try to correct my position in the institute or the organization that I am working in. I'm working in the NIPCON project, which is a global project hosted by Ethiopian Public Health Institute, not the Addis Ababa Health Bureau and the like. Ethiopian Public Health Institute is a federal institute, which is a technical arm of the Ministry of Health in Ethiopia. And so Ethiopian Public Health Institute, as I tried to mention before, is hosting various projects that are funded by international organizations. Therefore, the NIP, National Information Platform for Nutrition, is hosted under the Ethiopian Public Health Institute. And therefore, this project is technically supporting 3 critical organizations or federal ministries in Ethiopia. One is the Ministry of Agriculture, and the second is Ministry of Education, and the rest is Ministry of Health. In these 3 ministries, we have been assigned, 3 technical advisors have been assigned in these 3 sectors, so that I am technically supporting the Ministry of Education, and in the Ministry of Education, there is a school feeding program, wide implement, yeah, and so that I am supporting this program, the school feeding program, under the Ministry of Education. Okay, now let me proceed to the points highlighted already. Based on your recommendation, I really focused on 4 points. The first point is on Ethiopia's policy approach to homegrown school feeding program. And the second one is on the role of local governments and community participation. And the third one is on impact on smallholder farmers and school meal quality. And is on lessons for other African countries, practice, challenges, and insights. And lastly, I need to try to conclude my remarks. Let me proceed from the first one. This exploring Ethiopia's model of a school feeding program offers valuable insights into how homegrown school feeding program is shaped candidates for security, education, and local economic development. These are the 3 key areas that the school feeding program is focusing on. The food security is an important element that should be taken into account, and education, as it has been said by the Rwandan expert on education. And the third main important point is on local economic development. Almost the Ethiopian context is almost similar to the context of Rwanda. So it's a good opportunity just to talk more in the context of Ethiopia. Therefore, Ethiopia's policy approach to homegrown school feeding program is that there is Ethiopia's homegrown school feeding program is part of the national school feeding policy. There is a policy which is being implemented currently, National School Feeding Policy and Strategy Framework. This framework has been launched on June 2021, and therefore this policy is an important policy that supports the school feeding program as a national program, the school feeding program that means. Therefore, this aims to improve educational outcomes and reduce hunger by sourcing food locally. As it has been said before from the context of Rwanda, this is the school feeding program aims to improve mainly the educational program. This is to improve the educational outcomes and later reducing hunger by sourcing food locally from smallholder farmers and other counterparts or stakeholders. Therefore, this school feeding program mainly emphasizes on the local procurement. Therefore, these schools in Ethiopia purchase food from smallholder farmers and fostering direct link between agriculture and education. This is a good opportunity just to link agriculture and education so that various types of schools, particularly primary schools from 1 to 8, have been given the chance just to utilize the school feeding program, mainly the homegrown school feeding program in the country. Therefore, various types of schools who have been supported by the program are directly or indirectly, depending on the context of various regions or states in the country, are trying to link themselves to the smallholder farmers so that they can purchase various types of food items for the school feeding program. The other point that the school feeding program that emphasizes is on the multi-sector collaboration. There are various types of sectors or ministries are trying to collaborate just to expand and to strengthen the program at national level. And therefore, the Ministry of Education, the Ministry of Agriculture, health, and local governments are trying to collaborate each other so as to strengthen the program and to get an outcome from the program. Therefore, this multi-sectoral collaboration is an important element that the school feeding program emphasizes on. And the third point that the program emphasizes is on nutrition focus. It focuses on nutrition. As I told you before, I am personally supporting the school feeding program as the school has a nutrition technical advisor. And so that we are trying to boost the capacity of expertise within the program and related issues. So that this nutrition, as it has been said from the Rwanda, is that in Ethiopia, stunting is reaching to 30 to 39%, and wasting is about 12%. And therefore, just to reduce this catastrophic issues, we are trying just to work hard in reducing these things, so that the nutrition is an important focus that has been given from the school feeding program. So that meals are designed to meet nutritional standards. Therefore, these have been incorporated, or the program is incorporating fortified foods to address micronutrient deficiencies. Of course, we're trying to address this essential problem that we are working, and still we are not satisfying the demands and the interest with regard to addressing the deficiencies of micronutrients by fortifying foods. So that the school feeding program is prioritizing this local sourcing, the community engagement, and multi-sectoral collaboration, as I told you before, so that making the models replicable across Africa. Local sourcing, as it has been said from the context of Rwanda, is very important. So that's why the home grown school feeding program is practicing in Ethiopia. The other point is that has been prioritized is the community engagement. The community engagement is very critical. Without the involvement in the participation of communities, the school feeding program could not be successful. So that the school feeding program prioritizes these critical elements: local sourcing, community engagement, and multi-sectoral collaboration. Let me proceed to the second element, the second point, which is on the role of local government and community participation. When I proceed to the local government, they are very essential in producing various types of foodstuffs as an input for the program. Therefore, under the local government, there should be some kind of coordination between the local government and the schools. And at the same time, there might be coordination between local governments and various types of units that have been established in the country. And the other coordination will be, it might be the coordination between centrally. Local governments might have a connection or coordination with the central government or various ministries. Therefore, local governments play a critical role in coordinating between the schools, farmers, and national agencies. The other point is resource allocation. These local governments ensure that funds and resources are distributed effectively to sustain the program, so that these local governments are very critical and they are leading the program. Being it is decentralized from the federal level, this program is taken to the local governments, that's regional governments. So that regional governments do have the mandate in mobilizing and in ensuring the funds and the resources that should be distributed effectively to sustain the program. And the other point is on monitoring and evaluation. The local authorities monitor milk quality, farmer participation, and the program outcome. This is an important element that the local government should do and are working on it, so that monitoring and evaluation is an important element, so that these local authorities are monitoring the milk quality and the diversity in the program. And at the same time, the farmer participation should be considered, and it has been advocated, promoted by the local governments, and so that the program outcomes are evaluated precisely. The other element is the community participation. Under this, there is parental involvement in farmer engagement. These specific sectors of the community are involved highly. Parents often contribute labor, funds, or food items, fostering a sense of ownership. And the farmer engagement, this, as I told you before, smallholder farmers are directly involved in supplying produce, creating a reliable market for their goods. These are the sectors of the community that are highly involved. But I believe that majority of the community should be involved in the participate in the school feeding program, so that the program will be highly effective in supporting these various schools in the country. So this decentralized approach ensures sustainability and strengthens community ties. Being decentralized, the approach ensures sustainability and strengthens community ties. This is an important point that should be taken into account. The third point is that the school feeding program, school feeding programs impact on smallholder farmers and the school meal quality. And as it has been said before, these smallholder farmers are very important groups of individuals that should be involved and that are, of course, involved in the school feeding program for various purposes. The first most important element of participation is on economic empowerment. It brings economic empowerment. The program will empower the smallholder farmers so that farmers gain a stable income by supplying schools, reducing their reliance on volatile markets. This is an important issue, so that the market for smallholder farmers will be very stable, and so that stably they can supply their products to these specific schools, so that no volatile markets at all, so that the school feeding program will empower the smallholder farmers in terms of their economic empowerment. The other important point of the school feeding program that its impact is that regarding the capacity building, many programs provide training on sustainable farming practice and quality standards. This is the school feeding program supports various types of farmers who are able to involve in the program, so that they are being supported in terms of their capacity, in terms of producing their surplus to the program. The other point is market access. Farmers benefit from structured demand, which encourage investment in production, so that the market access will be given as an important opportunity for the smallholder farmers, so that the school feeding program has an impact on these groups of individuals as an important element. Let me proceed to the school meal quality. The school feeding program brings about a nutritional value, locally sourced fresh ingredients improve the nutritional quality of meals. As it has been said, this school meal quality will be maintained, so that the home grown school feed program will bring about an important nutritional value for the students, so that locally sourced fresh ingredients will improve the nutritional quality of meals, as they are directly sourced from the smallholder farmers. The other point is diversity. This brings about diversity, incorporating a variety of fruits. For example, there will be grains, vegetables, dairies, and other food components, so that this will ensure balanced diet for students. This is another opportunity for the school meal quality. The other is food safety. The school feeding program will have an impact on food safety. The programs often include training on food handling and storage to maintain meal safety. We are always capacitating the capacity of smallholder farmers and other individuals who are directly involved in the school feeding program, so that food safety will be maintained, and so that the fresh and quality food will be served to the students at the school level. So the dual focus on farmer livelihoods and the milk quality creates a win-win scenario for both agriculture and education sectors. Let me proceed to the fourth one. Lessons for other African countries, success challenges and insights. With regard to success factors, there will be a political will. This political will is an important element in boosting and capacitating the school feeding program, so that a strong government commitment is essential for scaling and sustaining homegrown school feeding programs in countries and at continental level. I believe this one is an important element, so that everybody should focus on. If no political will, if no political commitment at all, the school feeding program couldn't sustain itself, and so that we couldn't benefit students at the school level. So that political will is very essential. The other point is multi-sectoral collaboration. As I told you before, this multi-sectoral collaboration is very, very critical. Involving education, agriculture, and health sector ensures holistic program design, so that so as to sustain the program, the various types of sectors and entities should be involved in. And the other point is community ownership, as it has been said and believed by all experts and others. Active participation by local communities enhances the program sustainability. If no community ownership, if no community participation, no program will sustain. Therefore, community participation and community ownership is an important element that should be taken into account. The challenges, I heard from the Rwandan counterpart, and so that funding constraint is an important constraint that we're faced with. So the funding constraint, limited budget in the country can hinder program expansion and quality. And the other challenge that we are facing with is the infrastructure gaps. Food storage facilities and transportation networks across the country can disrupt food supply chains. And the other point, the other challenge is farmer capacity. The smallholder farmers may lack and still lacking the resources to meet consistent demand for quality standards. And so that continuously we have to capacitate the smallholder farmers so as to produce a quality and plentiful supplies to schools. Insights for replication, adaptability. Adaptability is an important point that should be on. For tailor context, considering cultural preferences and agricultural practices. This is Ethiopia is practicing this adaptability mechanism. The other point is public-private partnership, and it has been known by all partners. Public-private partnership is an important point that should be focused on. Engaging private sector actors can address funding and logistical challenges, so that even this partnership should be strengthened. And the other point is data-driven decisions. There's a problem in utilizing data for decision-making, so that data-driven decision is an important element. Regular monitoring and evaluation help identify areas for improvement and demonstrate impact. As a conclusion, this Ethiopia's homegrown school feeding program models highlight the potential of school feeding programs to transform education, agriculture, and community development. So that by prioritizing local sourcing, community involvement, and multi-sector collaboration, these programs offer a blueprint for other African countries seeking to address food insecurity and improve educational outcomes. However, success depends on addressing funding, infrastructure, and capacity challenges while fostering adaptability and innovation. This is the point that I address it. Thank you for paying attention to my presentation or my discussion.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Melako. I think, again, very insightful to get an overview of how Ethiopia is implementing the homegrown school feeding program and what are some of those elements that actually shape how homegrown school feeding looks like in Ethiopia. And from your presentation, there are a number of similarities with, of course, Rwanda. And that touches on some of the last points that you were sharing, Melaku. There's political will where this is part of the national policy to actually ensure homegrown school feeding is supported, with local procurement being a major focus and really supporting farmers or capacitating farmers to engage in school feeding. And one of the things that you mentioned that's very important is there needs to be a sort of economic empowerment for these smallholder farmers, quite similar to the Rwandan context. How is this profitable to the smallholder farmers, and are there systems to allow them to engage? Are we ensuring that the school procurement system or the school meals programs become a market that farmers can rely on, and moving away from the volatile markets that farmers have been facing? And again, what you mentioned in terms of school meal quality, having the school meals programs being an avenue for diversification of diets, which is a very important factor. It's not just about providing meals, but it is about providing nutritious meals for school. So thank you so much, Melaku. Quite a number of great insights. I'd like to bring Dr. Theogene back just for around 3 minutes before we move on to the next panelist, because there are some questions specifically to you, Dr. Theogene, and I'd like you to maybe touch on a bit of those. So the first question I saw, and from Liesa, I think you've answered some of the questions to some of the panelists, but Liesa had an important questions regarding the co-financing of school feeding programs. So you had mentioned 3 types of school feeding program models, and she's largely interested in the national.
Sorry. Thank you, Brenda. Thank you, Alice, who asked the first question, which I tried to answer by typing. But for the sake of everyone's benefits, I would like to say that the government, what is trying to do to help farmers leverage school feeding programs as a market opportunities is to empower them by helping them to work, and then by working, they will get access to training, we get access to inputs on credit, they will get other government support so that they can be able to produce enough food for themselves and also for market. One. Secondly, I would say that farmers, what they are trying to do is to help link them with aggregators. So aggregators will come and they buy the food from farmers, and then they will be involved making sure that the food is safe, is of good quality, and then aggregators will sell it to schools. So what this means is that the farmers even in this case, will not be able to directly interact with the schools, but through capacity building and also other mechanisms to empower them, they will be able to indirectly interact with the schools. For the second questions, the question was about what are the parents' contribution. So in one of the programs, which is the 1 cup of milk per child, so there's no contribution. It's fully funded by the government. And the national school feeding program is where parents have to contribute. So they can contribute in cash, so in cash contribution. They can also contribute in kind. That includes firewood, that includes labor, that includes water, and the other activities that can support school feeding programs. So this is how they contribute. So in cash contribution, do not come as part of a school fees. It's on top of school fees. I guess that's all. And another question, I think, was about what is mentioned in the policies and also what is being done on the ground. So what we often see is this kind of policy practice gap, if I can refer to it as such. So it's like what is being said in the policy is not what is being implemented on the ground. So this is what we often see, and possibly with the new mechanisms, I guess the government will be able to address those challenges, as I said, through the Minister of Agriculture, which has a mandate to empower smallholder farmers. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Kyojin, and also thank you so much, Melaku, for those insights. And we can see there are those that are required to ensure that school feeding programs, particularly homegrown school feeding models, are successful and sustainable contextualized level at country level. So thank you so much. For our next discussion, this will be led by Dr. Nkumu. And discussions that we've had and that Eugene have mentioned, school feeding is not only about provisioning, but also it is food systems transformation. We have heard of how school feeding can improve nutrition by fortified meals in schools, and it can also provide economic empowerment for farmers, including farmers and also MSEs in their role in terms of local sourcing for food. To you, Jacqueline, kindly take us through in school feeding and food systems transformation, and why is homegrown school feeding such an important transformation within the food system space? So over to you.
Thank you very much for this, and also thank you, Melaku, for Ethiopia. So far, and food security. Primary education is and we do deliver food security and nutrition for school children. So what is different is when we start of the small and more holistic way of looking at school feeding programs. So beyond, when you start thinking about the role of small farmers and micro and small enterprises as platforms for strengthening the local systems, we now start looking at other sectors, and primarily agriculture. Mainly because the school feeding programs can affect farmers in terms of increasing their yield and profitability. However, the evidence based around this is small. So the link between school feeding programs or school meals and micro and small enterprises is really bidirectional. What that means is that micro and small enterprises and smallholder farmers are part of the food supply chain that can provide a ready market for food, for healthy and sustainable food. So they really do form an agricultural value chain that can be crucial to provide healthy and sustainable foods or school meals in school feeding programs. As well as micro and smallholder farmers as well can therefore then play a really critical role in shaping the food patterns and consumption choices in the food systems. So what I want to say in a nutshell is that the role of micro and small enterprises and smallholder farmers in the school feeding programs is really bi-directional. Then the other thing that perhaps I can mention a little bit, and both Melaku and Theogene have talked about, is the homegrown school feeding Homegrown school feeding really constitutes a school feeding model that is designed to provide children in schools with safe, diverse, and nutritious food that is sourced locally from the smallholders, farmer, micro and small enterprises at the locality. So this again really does provide a unique opportunity to address the needs of schools or the needs of school feeding programs. So perhaps what is the take home from us is that the school feeding programs can really be an important platform for a local food systems transformation, because the schools do act as a catalytic platform to ensure that these smallholder farmers or micro and small enterprises have a ready market. I'll stop there. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Jackie. And I think what you've touched on and what I stress a bit more is the fact that there's that bidirectional aspect to school feeding, how it shapes consumption, how it shapes production, because it does provide an aspect of, creating markets for farmers where they can actually sell their produce. So I think one question that I would maybe pose to you, Jacqueline, is when we look at smallholder farmers and micro and small enterprises and integrating them into school feeding programs, the school feeding programs and how this affects food systems transformation, what are the core elements or what are the roles these small enterprises play really to strengthen the local food systems in relation to school feeding? So the role that these smallholder farmers and MSEs largely play in these food systems.
Right. So the micro and small enterprises and smallholder farmer, when you think about the local food systems, maybe I should take a step back and really define what food systems are so that we can add this together. So when you think about food systems in general, you're talking about all the elements and activities that are related to food production, processing, distribution, preparation, and consumption of food. So all these activities really drive the socioeconomic and environmental outcomes. So that these micro and small enterprises play in food system is that they affect every aspect along the different pathways of food system. So let's take an example about when you think about, for example, farmers, when they produce food, there are a number of different people who are affected in that pathway. For instance, there would be farmers in the fields. There'll be, Theogene talked about aggregators. So there are businesses that are affected. So there are different nodes in the food system that are affected to ensure that the food is delivered to the schools. And the schools really do present a ready market for this. So in a nutshell, what I'm really saying is that the whole ecosystem around not just production, but just around the business. So the agribusiness sector and when you think about school feeding, the other aspect would be even just the people who prepare the food. There's a whole ecosystem around the food system that would be impacted, micro and small enterprises and smallholder farmers.
Thank you so much, and very, very key to note what Dr. Jacqueline has mentioned. Food systems are not linear; they're very dynamic, and within that, there are different nodes where the smallholder farmers and MSMEs come in to play specific roles, be it in food preparation, aggregation, transportation. There are quite a number of nodes, and there are quite a number of roles that they can play. And this is really touching on a question that I see John Muguru has posed. And I think you've answered already one part of that question. And the second part of his question is really, how can these smallholder farmers and enterprises be supported to supply, fresh, nutritious foods to school meal programs? Because traditionally, school meal programs have been seen to provide a certain set of meals, be it your rice and beans or your maize and beans. So how do we also integrate, the supply of fresh produce into school meals programs through MSEs and what are the challenges that we can foresee in establishing such partnerships?
One key challenge is it's very difficult for schools to engage individual farmers. And when we heard from the examples of Rwanda and Ethiopia, one key element in ensuring that farmers or smallholder farmers and micro and small enterprises are included is really for them to be organized into some groups or cooperatives so that they have a stronger voice or a stronger bargaining power, really, to participate in these school feeding programs or school meals ecosystem. So one way they can be strengthened is through capacity building and really organizing them into groups that then can have a stronger voice. And then they can really be trained on, for instance, what constitutes healthy and sustainable foods. How do you store this food? How do you prepare this food so that by the time they're delivered to schools, the foods are in a way that they're not compromised in terms of quality or nutrition. So a key thing is really organizing them into groups and strengthening their capacity and ensuring they have a strong voice where they also can really advocate for their individual needs that would empower them to be more effective. Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much, Jackie. Very important point again. A stronger bargaining power is in the collective. So if farmers create systems or associations that allow them to actually engage as a group, they do have a stronger bargaining power. And this was also clearly mentioned by Eugene and Melaku, where farmers are encouraged to create cooperatives that allows them to actually engage as a group. So thank you so much, Jackie, for those insights, because that again creates a very good segue to Ricky Aguda, really to touch on a very key element, which is at the heart of this particular webinar. How do we strengthen the smallholder farmers and MSMEs to participate in school feeding procurement? So Ricky, we've heard from Jackie, it's important for them to have a stronger bargaining power by banding together and forming associations and cooperatives. So Ricky, if you could highlight, what are some of these challenges that small SMEs face trying to access these particular markets? And what are some of the recommendations that you have come across, especially implementing the current project that is being co-implemented by Wasafiri and APHRC, largely focusing on how do we empower these associations or farmers to participate in school feeding procurement systems? So Ricky, over to you.
Thanks, Brenda, and of course, acknowledging the strong contributions made by colleagues on this call. It's a privilege to join the panel and also contribute, I think, probably more from the learnings that we have obtained or gained as Wasafiri in this space. And maybe just to, just acknowledging some of the points, the key points that have been mentioned already by some of the previous speakers. I think the issues, the challenges are pretty clear when it comes to the space and the operating environment that smallholder farmers and even MSEs are subjected to. So we are talking about typically businesses, if I can call them that, in a collective that operate with limited resources. So when it comes to, for example, the whole element of land that they use for their production, when it comes to access to finance, when it comes to information asymmetry, just basic knowledge about market opportunities, about accessing resources and inputs, those are challenges that are cross-cutting, but when you now start to examine it even from the lens of the urban smallholder farmers, I think you appreciate that this is amplified even further because the typical environment that we're looking at these school feeding programs in, especially in the urban informal settlements, the land parcels are even smaller. The constraints in terms of the state of the environment, if it's a production environment, if you're talking of pollution as a challenge, be it the water or even the land resources that these smallholder farmers have access to, that is just amplified. Now, if you again come to the MSEs and look at the MSEs in terms of the issues that have been pointed out, supplying schools, I think critically the issues around liquidity and of course having a voice to engage when it comes to matters such as the procurement policies. This have been pointed out, I think, to some extent, and what we've seen, and I would like to, I think, some of the opportunities that have presented themselves. And in the last few months as Wasafiri, what have we been doing in this space and how has that started to yield some results? So I think I want to speak to two critical considerations. The first one would be around the issue of advocacy and ensuring that not only do we have policies that allow for the participation of smallholder farmers in and MSEs in, but more critically, how do we ensure that these MSEs and smallholder farmers have a place at the table as these policies and strategies and guidelines are being formulated? I think that is a critical space, and as Jackie just mentioned, if they are not adequately organized, they cannot attain or have a voice. So we are hearing further from Esther Mugusu in the coming minutes, but in collaboration with Nairobi County, and Nairobi County as the Food Liaison Advisory Group Committee, which is actually a collective, it's a multi-sectoral platform to come and speak into issues around food systems in Nairobi County. We have been able, through activities that have really brought together different MSEs and smallholder farmers as within different wards, if I can call it that, in Nairobi County engagements. And just that in itself, already part of the empowerment, but it can't end there. Of course, they have to function as a collective. And when it comes to functioning as a collective, we have to take a step back and appreciate how do you empower an MSE where the individual trader is, or the owner of the business is working as an individual. You know, they don't have staff around them. You know, they are either hawking their product, or they, you know, they're laying it down by the side of the street, or if they have a bit of
Ricky, we've lost you a bit. Just recap.
You know, but how do you
Ricky, if you can hear me, just recap what you said.
To move outside that immediately as a collective and acquire by the other? Sorry.
Yeah, we're losing you a bit. If you could just recap your last statement.
Okay, so as I was saying, basically, when it comes to organizing the collective, we have to reflect on the immediate operating environment of these SMEs, individually trading units. So organizing them as a collective has actually meant encouraging the perception and concept of local business associations, which we have actually seen coming together in Korogosho, in Mukuru and Kibra. And the beauty when it comes to the policy practice connect is that, as an example for Kenya, we have the Micro and Small Enterprise Authority, which has the manpower MSEs that are in that space, whether smallholder farmers or food vendors, and we've been able to utilize the platforms that this Micro Small Enterprise Authority has to actually empower these MSEs that we're capacitating to then actually form these associations. And already that in and of itself has raised interest amongst other stakeholders, all the way through to the likes of the Kenya Private Sector Authority, Association, sorry, KEPSA, which of course plays a much more vital role in public-private dialogue that is about a conducive and an enabling business environment. So what I'm basically pointing out or trying to paint is creating that linkage that allows the smallholder farmers and MSEs to work together as a collective, but then also bringing them into spaces where they can link to established industry associations that can both provide them with the necessary able where they can influence the implementation of policies to their favor.
Good. Thank you, Ricky. I see there's a host of questions on the chats. So just because I have my eye on the clock, I might not go into all the questions that are on the chat, but I just encourage the panelists to also look at the chat box and see what kind of questions are being posed. But Ricky, my question to you before we go to the next panelist is, having worked with currently, the smallholder farmers and the MSMEs, and trying to help them to integrate themselves into the school procurement systems. What is some of the advice you can give a farmer who's part of this particular webinar, or a member of an organization or an enterprise that wants to take part in the school feeding system? What would you advise them to do? What are those steps that they could take to formalize themselves? And what are the existing platforms that they should be part of to ensure that they can participate in school procurement systems?
Thanks, Brenda. So I think a quick input that I would make on that, twofold. So to the farmers who may be listening in and thinking, well, how does this happen? How do I get into this space? Part of we've been doing with the local business associations that I've mentioned in Korogosho and Kuru and Kibra is to actually link them into larger farmer associations. So in this regard, we have the Kenya National Farmers Federation and the local business associations in Nairobi. These urban farmers are actually forming and joining the Kenya National Farmers Federation as a unit, as a county unit. So Kenya National Farmers Federation is one among several, but it is visible. So the importance of that is farmers can reach out through such institutions and then get linked in to a local business association that is within their geographical scope or region. The second point, again, linking to institutional collaboration. This is a public-private participation space. I mentioned the Micro Small Enterprise Authority of Kenya. One interesting thing about joining or being a member of that authority is that when they register micro small enterprises, they categorize them according to the value chains, into the businesses that they're active in. And what that does is that it then also creates pockets where micro small enterprises or smallholder farmers within the same value chains, within the same geographies can be brought together. So I think what I'm really emphasizing is that it is by coming and participating in established institutions, whether they are private sector institutions or public sector institutions, because the spirit of collaboration is actually there. So what is critical is to engage proactively and then push and really just ensure that you find your space at the negotiating table. Yeah.
I think very, very key to highlight, what are the practical steps that smallholder farmers and these micro small enterprises can actually take to include themselves in procurement systems. So thank you so much, Ricky. We will get back to you once I see a number of questions that are being posted on the chat. But I would like to also just now pivot slightly to Emmanuel Atamba. And this is really, again, a very clear connection from what we've been discussing. How do we ensure that schools provide that conduit for market access for farmers and smallholder farmers? And there's usually a group that is not spoken about as such. And we do also want to see smallholder farmers and MSEs being part of the procurement processes of this particular community of schools called complementary schools. So Emmanuel, tell us, what are complementary schools for those who are not aware of this terminology? And how do they fit into the school feeding procurement system and the school feeding environment at large? So over to you, Emmanuel.
Yeah, thanks, Brenda, and thanks to APHRC and Wasafiri for organizing this very nice conversation. So my name is Emmanuel Atamba. I'm the country program manager food systems for TMG Research. I'll just highlight so that you get a bit of the context of how I get into this conversation. So for the past year or so, TMG has been testing different models for school feeding. It only happened that we are testing this. Of course, we have been doing a lot of projects in Mukuru, so we are testing different in different, not different, but rather difficult circumstances for school feeding. And we are looking at this in Mukuru, which is one of the biggest informal settlements in Nairobi. And again, in complementary schools, which otherwise are referred to as informal schools. So we are working with complementary schools because one, they have not been reached by the Dishina County program yet. I don't know if they'll be reached by our president's Chapati program, but they have not yet been reached by Dishina County as at now. But I think the most important thing is how we look at this conversation as TMG. So one, we look at the school feeding programs, understanding the importance of school feeding programs, as has been mentioned. I don't want to repeat that. But I think one of or two of the things that we are looking at in school feeding, we are looking at one, the financial sustainability of school feeding programs. When we started this program, we were clear about, because the program we are implementing is called Urban Food Futures. It's a program that we are implementing, recognizing that our food systems, especially in urban areas and in, for example, in Kenya, urban informal settlements, are faced with multiple challenges. And some of those challenges are some of these instabilities at a global level. You saw what happened with the USAID the other day when Trump came in. So if there are school feeding programs that were depending on USAID, what has happened to them today? So we are looking at financial sustainability of school feeding programs. And when you're looking at financial sustainability, what we have been trying to do in Mukuru together with parents and the schools and our partners, VICO and Ruben Center, is to test better cost recovery mechanisms. And by cost recovery mechanisms, we are saying we want to see that parents are able to contribute as much as they are able to for school feeding programs. That is the only way to ensure sustainability. Some of the things that you are seeing today, like the Chapo example that I'm saying, I don't know why people are not talking about it on this call. I mean, you know, if a president is showing up somewhere and promising that there will be 1 million chapatis being produced in the country, what is the sustainability of that? Where was the feasibility study of that? Where were the consultations made? And you can quickly see that the chapatis were served yesterday. And I'm not sure if the machine was procured or the machine was a story and the chapatis is a real thing. So sustainability of school feeding programs lies solely, according to the work that we have done and the engagements that we have done in Mukuru and with the parents in Mukuru. Sustainability of school feeding program is more secure with financing from parents, not from government, because governments are run by politicians. And in the context where we are talking about, I don't know about the context of Rwanda, because I can see our colleague from Rwanda provided a very good timeline. And maybe the advantage of Rwanda is that since 2010, the timeline when the school feeding programs were started until now, it is the same president. You can see our case is quite different. That now we might, even when we get another president, maybe it will not be chapatis, maybe they will bring yogurt or sausages. Political systems cannot necessarily sustain or run sustainable school feeding programs that are best focused on the objective of ensuring that children get a warm meal at lunchtime, get a nutritious meal at lunchtime. Sometimes politicians can use, and I'm not saying only in the case of Dishina County in Nairobi, but you have seen a lot in other counties. Sometimes politicians can use school feeding program for political expediency. And therefore, the sustainability of school feeding programs should not be pegged on structures that are controlled by politicians. I just want to put it out there. We have seen in other counties, some people are giving packets of milk with pictures of the politicians on the packets of milk. I mean, are we going to sit here and say homegrown school feeding program? Is that homegrown school feeding program, Brenda? No, maybe not. But so this is the work we have been, in Mukuru, we have tested for the last 5 months a stepwise progressive payment approach. We started with a very interesting menu, including Friday today, they have been served with spinach, nyama, and ugali. This is what they get every Friday. So we started with a free menu for 1,000 children, and then we continued progressively every month, adding 25%. So now the parents are paying 22.5 shillings. And this, we managed only this month, we changed because they were supposed to pay 100% for this month, but we had engagements with the parents to agree on what price they are comfortable paying and at what menu that delivers. So this testing different options of cost recovery. So in that context of Mukuru, and you are talking about homegrown school feeding program, I'm not sure if that exactly is the conversation that we are having in Mukuru or that is possible to have in Mukuru. The conversation in Mukuru is about designing a school feeding model that is efficient in terms of cost, that guarantees quality, and that is able to create a mechanism for parent contributions. Yeah. Because again, remember in that context, we are talking about a context where the government is not supporting those programs. And the government, I think, has so far said that they have no way of reaching those children in complementary schools that are not supported by government. So, but in my view, in the overall homegrown school feeding conversation, what is being discussed, I think we need to interrogate two things. What are the advantages of an overly centralized school feeding program? You know, and what are the disadvantages of such a program? Because we are talking about how farmers and small, informal vendors can participate in procurement and in supplying. But how can you supply spinach for the Dishina County school feeding program that is supplying to over 300,000 children? The amalgamation of that program, the centralization of the program to make sure that 300,000 children are being fed in the county, technically locks out all farmers. I mean, I don't know, Ricky has talked about farmers in Nairobi joining together and being members of KENAF and then through KENAF being able to supply. I doubt if farmers in Nairobi, if they come together and get a tender, that they will be able to supply that amount of volumes of fresh produce for 300,000 kids. So we are creating a problem that does not exist because we are not clear as researchers, as experts, as government. For those who are in government, I've seen Esther here. We are not clear on what are the advantages of centralizing school feeding to a point where we are organizing the menu from the level of the president, and the president decides that this week is chapatis and people are going to get chapatis. Centralizing school feeding programs or decentralizing them. There are advantages, for example, what we have done with the TMG, because the complementary schools have an average of about 240 pupils. Then it is not economically viable to try to create kitchens in all these schools. So what we did, we created one kitchen that is able to now serve more than 1,000 children in one of the schools. But beyond that, the question is, beyond 1,000, beyond 10,000, beyond 20,000, at what extent is centralizing losing its value? Yeah, because you centralize school feeding programs to achieve economies of scale. So we need to be clear because I think even now with the scale of Dishina County of 300,000 children from one procurement system and from one preparation and distribution system, even though the kitchens, I know the kitchens are the 10,000 kids per kitchen, meals per kitchen. I would still feel like it would be difficult for rice farmers in Mwea to supply to that system and supply if rice or twice a day or something like that. So I think if you're talking about how to interrogate very specifically to say then if our intention is to implement a homegrown school feeding program, then we need to have a limit for how much we centralize school feeding programs. That should be the first step. And I've seen a friend from Rwanda also trying to explain how it is difficult for farmers to supply. Of course, if it's a national school feeding program, a farmer, 1 acre, farmer has no chance to be able to supply commercially to that system for them to do that. So I think we need to question the structures, we need to question the system, we need to question the models that we are using for school feeding. Because I think it has been said here, it's not just about delivering meals. It is about looking at how that program can also have economic benefits. I went to a rural, I was brought up in the rural, so I went to a rural primary school, and we were able to work on the school farm, and we used to bring maize and beans to the school for lunch. Yeah, that is homegrown school feeding. I've never seen any other homegrown school feeding model better than that, even up to the point where the children are able to even work on the school farm and produce some produce at the school farm. That is with most of the maize. But there was an intention to make sure that the food is sourced locally. Bring the maize, they can bring the fire. When you centralize, you're centralizing the procurement power within certain structures, and then you say, then it is very difficult for our farmers to approach that structure. Then who created that structure created if it locks out smaller actors? So I think we need to look at that so that and then we can also achieve transparency, we can achieve accountability. So I think the value is in exploring different models, my friends, because we can sit here, we can have another panel discussion and say, so how exactly do we integrate smallholder farmers in the Nairobi County school feeding program? They cannot be integrated. Zero chance they can be integrated. Yeah, but if that program is decentralized level, now, my friend, we are talking about buying machines to make chapatis, and chapatis are made virtually in all the streets of Nairobi. Then what kind of homegrown school feeding model will we be implementing? Even from a point of, giving people the opportunity to work in those kitchens to prepare those chapatis and earn a living by doing that. Then we want to buy a machine that will be worth millions or billions of shillings, producing things that we can produce by our hands and earn a living. So I think we need to interrogate that. And I think the homegrown school feeding model is nice when you think about it. It's impractical in some contexts. In the context of urban informal settlements, it is impractical to imagine that food can be sourced from farmers locally to be supplied to schools. Remember, there are two competing interests here. You're talking about markets for farmers, but on the other side of school feeding, for school feeding to run, you're talking about reducing the cost as much as possible. So you have to weigh those two interests. And if you ask me, in the school feeding program that we are running, if someone says, I have spinach that is organic and I've just grown it near here in Nairobi and I'm selling it at 10 times the price, I say, you eat your spinach, my friend, because you will not be able to convince parents to pay for a higher amount simply because it is sourced locally. So, but in the rural areas, this is where we really need to make sure, and those structures are there. I see schools in rural areas, even without government support, doing exactly what homegrown school feeding programs models look like. But what happens? We allow again our good governments, our good county governments to interfere with those programs, to break those programs, to collapse those kitchens so that we can have big programs where we make announcements and say, okay, so today, as the governor of Uasin Gishu, people are going to eat sausages. I think that's so. The policy and the practice is somehow different. But my main point, so that you don't just go with the chapati story, it's really that if we want farmers and informal vendors, especially in Mukuru, informal vendors supply almost 100% of the fresh produce there. If we want them to participate in school feeding and enjoy the economic supplying to programs in school feeding because they have a good market and they buy, then it is just upon us to remove the hurdles. Because those hurdles that we are talking about, those challenges of farmers supplying, are hurdles that we have created by creating programs that are not efficient because of expediency of certain interests, rather than creating systems that actually work and work for our people. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Emmanuel. I think in the spirit of dialogue and dissent, you have done what we call throwing a spanner into the works. But I think it's good to listen to a different view of how you see school feeding programs being implemented from a practical point of the model that you are currently putting in place. And I like what you said. Is it really homegrown school feeding, or is it politically grown school feeding programs? Is it being driven by politics, or is it really being driven by us trying to actually achieve sustainability of school feeding programs? And the fact that geopolitical factors can come and shift, the models that we're implementing, are they sustainable in the long run? And can they be contextualized to the space within which we are operating? If it's urban settlements, does homegrown school feeding work, or does a parent-centric model ideally work so that it ensures sustainability? And a question that was thrown to you, Ricky, I'll give you a chance to respond, was, with the model of centralization, is it locking out farmers, even with the push to formalize these local business associations to include themselves in the procurement systems? How does aggregation work? How does that logistics work? So I think, Ricky, kindly do answer that one question, because from what Emmanuel has highlighted, it would be a great point to now bring in Esther, who works within the dishing. But first of all, Ricky, on that.
Okay. So I think let's appreciate, and I think I do agree with Emmanuel. When we speak of urban farming or urban production, the gist of it is really I would say an element of continued self-sufficiency. It's subsidizing yourself at that level. It's not that urban farmers, especially in the setting we're talking about, informal settlements, are able to cause a shift in the supply chain. They are not. They're basically just trying to cater for themselves in the initial, and sometimes there is a bit of surplus that they can supply to their neighbors, into the local markets. So in this context, I think what we need to appreciate is the opportunity is for the SMEs as an aggregate or an organized association to put together their resources, to negotiate, contracts, and through the right channels to actually have a direct link to supply chains in the rural settings. That cuts out to some extent the middlemen. And of course, then based on the orders or the contracts that they're able to engage and sign with the schools in their communities, that brings food right from the farmer to the end user. So if the model, for example, as Emmanuel has said, you've got some localized school kitchens, then that would be the entry point for these associations. If it is direct to a school which has its own internal kitchen setup, then they have to work out. Those are basically business arrangements that these associations must be aware of and must be capacitated at. How do you equip the micro, small enterprises so that they can participate in business, then they can make use of economies of scale and all the other complements that actually make for effective business. You're not trying to cause a tilt away from the normal dynamics of business, but you're just trying to cause some synergies that will allow them to actually participate effectively. And those opportunities do exist, where you engage them through farmer associations that work, that have a track record, that are credible, and that pay attention, I think, especially in our circumstances, to issues around food safety, food quality, because it's not just about where can I get any spinach, cabbage, potatoes, am I getting product that is actually safe and nutritious? And is that what I'm pushing into the supply chain? I think the other critical point, just to make as a parting shot there, is also then to improve capacity or at the consumer level around the importance of using the wide variety of foods that we have, healthy, sustainable foods, but we know they have seasonal variabilities in production. So we cannot speak of school menus that will always run on kales or on cabbage. We have to allow for that variability so that the different vegetables, the different food groups that we have out there that have sometimes have seasonality in production, find their way into school feeding programs. I think if we do that, then we're actually even strengthening our food system to a much higher capacity or degree than we could imagine. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, thank you so much, Ricky. One point that attempts to summarize what you were highlighting, Emmanuel, is we need to look for a model that's sustainable and speaks to the economies of scale. And what does that look like? Decentralization or centralization? And what would be the focus? So I think this is a good segue to bring in Esther Mogusu. And Esther, I think from what has been shared, we would like to understand for those who are not here, what is the Dishina County model as a model that is supported by the county government of Nairobi? And how does this model promote the involvement of local MSEs and also smallholder farmers to be integrated into that supply chain? And of course, speaking to the concept of sustainability of, especially within these urban settings. So over to you, Esther. If you're speaking, you are muted.
Okay. Thank you, Brenda. Thank you, Emmanuel, for speaking so much about Dishina County. I think you mentioned Dishina County times in your presentation, and we truly appreciate that you actually acknowledge that we have that program that is really taking care of a lot of Nairobi children. So allow me to go through. We will have a discussion, throw in a few words here and there. So Dishina County is the name of the Nairobi School Feeding Program. And for the record, this feeding program is specifically targeted to public primary schools, centers. And this is for the simple reason that according to the government's PFM Act, we like redirect monies to private enterprises. And I know that is the challenge we have with our informal schools, which we are really trying to look for a solution on how to incorporate those learners, because again, this is public money, these are public finances, but we are establishing modalities on how we loop in the learners from the informal settlements. And so maybe just for the record, the history of school feeding in Nairobi, it is over 70 years old. So it did not start with Dishina County. So Emmanuel, Dishina County is just here. Those who were in Nairobi earlier, they had feeding in schools. If you would look at this plaque, this is a plaque of 1969 when a central kitchen was being opened. And this was not a dishi kitchen. It was actually a school meal central kitchen for Nairobi City Council back then in 1969. And so how far back did this start? This started in 1946. And from 1946 to about 1998, we actually had a centralized feeding model where we had 4 central kitchens. Those who know Nairobi, we had a kitchen in Pumwani, we had another kitchen around Eastlands area in Makadara. Then we had a kitchen in Joseph Kang'ethe, that's on the Kibra side. and we had another one around where the current Nairobi Primary School is. So from 1998, because of logistical challenges, the Nairobi City Council did not continue with that model of feeding. So from 1998 to 2018, there were various models of school meals in schools, and these were purely supported by parents as part of school levies. A lot of NGOs came around, like WFP, we had the Feed the Children, and we had religious organizations like in Mukuru area. We have religious organizations, especially the Catholic Church that feeds children. In the Westlands, Parklands area, we have the Hindu community that also feeds children, fed children, and still is feeding children. So from 2018 to 2020, so we went into a free meals and nutrition program through cash transfer for the early childhood development centers. So what had changed is that early childhood development education had shifted because of the shift in the constitution, and we had the 2 levels of government. So ECDE was assigned to the county governments, and from then we had a system of capitation where the funds were sent to the ECD centers. At least that happens in Nairobi County. And within the capitation funds, we have an allocation for school meals for each learner. And so from August, again, 2023 to date, that is when we initiated Dishina County School Feeding Program. But again, for the ECD learners, we still have some funds that are sent to the ECD center, and they're given an extra snack mid-morning, and also for those late afternoon. So what was the rationale, especially of Dishina County? So we know that Nairobi is the capital city of Kenya, and it's also a regional hub. So being a regional hub, so we have a lot of immigrants, we have refugee communities, we have foreigners, and of course we have huge rural urban migration for people who are seeking for employment. And for that reason, we have a huge population in Nairobi that is probably of low socioeconomic status. And we have 60% of the population in the city, 60% of 5 million living in the informal settlement. And we know that informal settlements are not organized spaces, so we are going to have a general lack of social amenities, including education institutions. And so probably that is why the coverage of even some of these targeted programs are going to not have a very wide coverage within those spaces. However, the Nairobi City County has tried to reach out to establish new schools, but I know we have a few areas that we do not have public institutions yet, but there's an effort to actually make that possible, even if it's through the ECD centers. So a formative study just before Dishina County was established, we realized 1 in 4 children in Nairobi County, especially from the informal settlements, they miss school due to lack of a meal at home. And then according to our constitution, every child has a right to basic nutrition, and that school meals are a crucial safety net for school nutrition, and this for school children, and this has actually been acknowledged to complement the free primary education that we have in Kenya. And also that daily hot meals are an incentive for children to enroll, attend and complete schooling, as well as improving their dietary intake. And for this, we've actually had an increased enrollment of about 34% in the first year of implementation of Dishina County. And so in terms of enrollment, in terms of attendance, which is almost 100% on a daily basis, then this is something that has really worked for the children. For the health and nutrition, so when children come to school, we target them with other health and nutrition interventions, and also for them receiving a nutritious diet that is not only quality, but it's safe, because we employ all the safety standards. And so when you walk into a school and you approach a school where children are benefiting from this program, you can actually see that they're visibly healthy, and the children are in of good nutritional status. And we know that this, again, contributes to better achievements in school. And also the ripple effect across the agriculture, the education, and health. So the return on investment is quite huge. For us to do the analysis across the different sectors, then we realize that this program has actually been very, very instrumental. So apart from the learners outcomes, we are looking at a strengthened effort towards universal access to free education. More children are coming to school. More children are actually attending school on a daily basis. And more children are transitioning from the different levels of the education system. From ECDE, they've got to primary. From primary, we've successfully transited children into junior school. And now in the next 1 year, we are going to see our children move over into senior school. So for the communities, we have strengthened food and nutrition security. And someone may ask, so how is this possible? When we've planned for the younger children in the household, then it means that the household does not have to cater for that extra meal, probably for lunchtime or for whichever other time, to be able to give it to the child. So we have less people being planned for at household level. And but the fact that children are receiving a meal in school, it means that there is a strengthened food and nutrition security, and even for the community, because instead of this child going back home and for the parents cooking extra food for the learners, because it is not typical of a household in Nairobi to have probably one child going to school. They could have 1, 2, 3 children. We know that KDHS told us that the average children per woman in Nairobi is about 4. So at least at any one point would have a minimum of 2 children. Yeah, probably one will be in ECDE, another one in primary or 2 in primary, and another one in junior school, or the other one in a higher level. So then at least this takes care of a lot of those costs. And we are talking about the most vulnerable groups. We have children eating their food and sometimes carrying it home. Actually, a lot of times carrying it for their siblings or even for their parents. We have jobs that are being created among the school community. And we have a lot of jobs, especially along what we are calling the school feeding program value chain. When we talk about the smallholder farmers, I liked the expression of the sheer numbers that we are feeding over 300,000 learners. So the amount of food that we cook in those kitchens is huge, and the amount of food that we serve is actually a lot. So what happens is that this food is now sourced from rural Kenya. We know that this is Nairobi. We do not grow a lot of food in Nairobi. So when food is sourced from probably some dengu from a farmer in Makueni, some dengu, there's this special dengu that we cook that comes from Busia. We have some cabbage and tomatoes coming from Kiambu or coming from Murang'a or Kirinyaga. We have potatoes coming in. We have onions coming all the way from Loitoktok. So we are creating jobs right down there. And then we have now the distribution value chain right from the farm into the market or to the aggregators and getting that food into our central stores and probably having that food redistributed, and then having people who work within the kitchens and also within the food distribution and within the schools to actually serve the food. So it's quite a huge, huge number. And currently, we actually have over 2,000 staff who are working in our feeding program. So for the farmers, they have increased access to structured markets. And the markets from down there, if we are to talk about the smallholder farmers, the amount of food we cook, definitely and rightfully, as Mr. Tamba said, Emmanuel said, we cannot have it coming from smallholder farmers alone. It has to be aggregated. And that is how we use a lot of aggregators to actually pull that food together so that they can be able to supply it to our program. We are operating within some laws that are already existing in this country. The most basic one is the Constitution of Kenya. That is Article 53(1)(c) of the Constitution of Kenya 2010. And this is talking about the basic provision of basic nutrition, shelter, and healthcare. And also, we have allowed our parents to also participate. You know that in a county, the parents have a role. They give a parental contribution of 5 shillings. And this is because then it is a responsibility for them to be able to do that. But those who are not able to, we also have provision for that, and they are also being taken care of. And just to take you back to where all this began, issues around nutrition in this country, and more specifically school nutrition. It is all anchored in the Food Security and Nutrition Policy, which was a sessional paper way back in 2011. And when we had a great drought in the Horn of Africa. And it explicitly talked about nutrition across the life cycle and across different settings. And in the section 5 of that policy, it talks about nutrition and nutrition education in schools. And it actually recognizes that malnutrition in early childhood can affect school enrollment, attendance, attentiveness, concentration, aptitude, and overall performance. So we realize that a lot of people way back actually thought about school meals and how it contributes to education. So for Nairobi, we have 2 outcomes. One is the primary outcome, which is improved nutritional status of school-going children in public primary schools and ECD centers. And our secondary outcome is increased school enrollment, attendance, performance, and transition rates. And for this, we've been able to actually have a very good sneak preview within the first and now into the second year of our implementation. So what is our model like? So we have what is called a hub and spoke model. And this has been influenced by the historical model of central kitchens. If you have a good geography of Nairobi, we have our schools, at least the old schools, that were built and clustered around particular areas. If you go to Starehe sub-county, for example, it has 11 schools, all placed around the same area. And when you look at the others, they are also clustered around the central side. We have the Nairobi Primary, the Lady Northie, ECD, the Nairobi, Nairobi Primary, Moi Avenue. We have St. George's, we have State House Primary. So you can see how all those schools are clustered around each other. You go to Makadara side, you have a lot of schools around next to each other, St. Michael's, Nile Road, Harambee Primary, and so many of them, about 29 of them, just clustered around the same place. So when we look at that distribution of schools in Nairobi, then it would not make sense that each and every school has an individual kitchen. So it would be prudent to use resources to build a central kitchen, and hence adoption of the centralized kitchen model, and distribute that food to the other schools. So for us, the central kitchen model actually has a history, and that is how dishing account is just a scale up of a model that was there since a long, way long back. And so what we've done currently is to build a central kitchen within every sub-county. We have 17 administrative units in Nairobi County. And so we have a central kitchen in each and every one of them. We have acquired 2 NCDF kitchens, so that's National Constituency Development Fund. We have kitchens built by Waheshimiwas, one in Dagoretti South, one in Embakasi West. And we have one huge kitchen that is owned by our vendor, Food for Education, that is in industrial area, that is equivalent to about 5 of the kitchens that we have. So food sourcing, and now I would be speaking to the food distribution model that we have and the sourcing. So our sourcing is purely through aggregators who will buy from smallholder farmers in rural Kenya and now come and sell it and distribute it to our central kitchens. So we have dry foods that are stored in a central warehouse, pretty huge, and then they're redistributed to the central kitchens, while the fresh foods are supplied to individual central kitchens directly. And this is for freshness. We actually have our fresh supplies coming in twice a week, and we have the dry foods being bought especially off-season. When we have our dengus being harvested and being sold at 20 shillings in rural Makueni, so for us, we'd be buying that, as opposed to buying a kilo of dengu like what we have in our supermarkets, which are being bought for quite a huge price. So that is how we are able to maintain the low prices and the low cost of the feeding program. And so that is something that should actually be encouraged, that instead of farmers harvesting their food and having it go to waste because they do not have a market, so the centralized kitchen models or the central warehousing is actually also a way of just aggregating that food and preserving that food so that you buy food at a cheaper price and then use it throughout the year, because we know that dry foods are not perishable if they're well stored. The food is then prepared in the central kitchens, which we are calling the hub, based in every sub-county, and then they are transported and delivered to learners in the spokes, which are the primary schools and the city centers. So our funding model is through a co-share between parents, and then we have a subsidy supported by actually both governments, the county government, national government, and also by some partners. So what are we, sorry about that. So what we've achieved, some of that I've already talked about. The 17 central kitchens in every sub-county, over 200 schools spread across Nairobi, feeding over 310,000 learners every day. And since inception, we've actually served more than 35 million meals, and this is since August 2023. And whatever we give is very nutritious, it is plant-based, and it is 550 grams of high protein, high carbohydrates, because we know that these are young people. They are growing at a very fast rate. When you talk about ECD, this is probably from age 4 to about 6. And then we have the older child, and then we have the adolescents. So this is an age group where they consume a lot of food. So for the employees, I already talked about over 2,000 employees, and we have sort of skewed our employment to women and youth. A lot of what we do is, there's a heavy lifting, there's the cooking, there's the digital technology where we are really relying on our youth to support us. We have loaders, we have cleaners. So there are those jobs that probably lighter jobs that will be given to the women, the heavier jobs, and probably the more cognitively intense jobs that will support our youth. So that is something at least that we pride in. And then we have eco-friendly energy sources and energy-saving GECOs. So we use pressed briquettes as a source of energy, which is actually press sawdust that ordinarily would be thrown away or burnt up, but that is actually what we use for fueling our kitchens. And the co-sharing funding model between the parents, government, and the partners has really worked for us. And it is a very good way of establishing sustainability. If we were to change the balance or we were to change the proportion of cost share, then it will be easy because the parents are already involved right from the start. I talked about a technology that we use. Those of you who have seen children or people wearing the yellow bands, like what I'm wearing here. So we have, when we are engaging our learners and parents, we actually put them in a database. And the parents' mobile account, mostly M-Pesa, is linked to the child's database. And so the children actually, the parents pay to the child's wallet, the mobile wallet, so that they can be able to have the money within their digital meal card. And that yellow band that we see is actually the digital meal card. And so when the children are tapped, you can see that from the upper photo. So the tapping is actually the tapping. That yellow band has a chip, and it is that chip that is going to show how much money is actually remaining within the child's digital meal card. So then we are able to even do a physical count of how many children ate during the day. So what are the children consuming, where the children are. So we can be able to say where the child ate, which school, where the food was served from which kitchen. So you're able to do all that tracking. And then there's predictive analysis, where there's individualized planning and preparation and distribution. We cook meals per learner. We weigh, we do the way, we prepare foods by weight, and we dispatch food from the kitchen by weight, targeting every learner, each and every individual learner. If we have information that learners are not going to be in school on probably the following day, then their meals are not going to be counted. And so it is just the weight that is going to be removed. And it is also a way to prevent food loss along the value chain, where we are cooking food for children that are not in school. So we'll only cook for children who are actually in school. But that is not to say that we don't allow, in case we miss our numbers, we always have a plus minus, so that we can be able to take care of children who are, of course, some additions, so that we can take care of children who may just show up. So for the impact, for us, it should be around child health, around nutrition, and also issues around safety. We care about safety a lot. And when we cook the food, we actually draw samples of each and every vessel that cooks the food and keep it for 72 hours in case there are any issues out there. And so quality checks, the quality control is something that is key right across the value chain, right from the sourcing of the commodities to the warehousing, to the storage conditions, to the cooking, to the handling. And even our food handlers are actually tested, and they're certified every 6 months. So for education outcomes, we have actually seen a very significant results in nutrition, in educational outcomes. There are those areas where the program started earlier, like in Dagoretti South, it had been started earlier by the CDF program. And we actually saw that in that particular sub-county, it was the top performing in Nairobi City for the time that the program was actually ongoing. So talking about PPP, so for us, our PPP is a very interesting one. So looking at the processes that we've actually gone through. So initially we did the research on our model and just seeing what works and what does not. And just to tell Emmanuel that we supported and we participated in a baseline assessment of schools in Mukuru, the informal settlement, for them to determine what model actually worked for them. And we even took, I know they work with Akiba Mashinani Trust, TMG works with Akiba Mashinani Trust. And we took them to one of our kitchens to actually see the processes, so they could actually be convinced that that is really what would work, because then working in an unstable environment actually means that you do not have a lot of space to do infrastructure. So for us, we did a research on our model, we did stakeholder engagement, and then we costed the model and also mobilized resources, including internal resources, that is from government level, and also external sources, that is from the parents and also from partners. And our rollout was actually a phased approach, because we knew that we were going to learn lots of lessons as we moved along. And for that worked for us quite a bit. So who are the partners in Dishina County? So we have the Nairobi City County government. So where the city does infrastructure, we do financing through the exchequer, we do oversight, we do policy implementation. Then we have Food for Education, whom we have actually recruited through the public procurement procedures. And so they deploy a technology that is able to maintain the digital meal card for the learner. And then also through the Food for Education Foundation, they have partner subsidy through their partners that they actually front to us. And that is how we've been able to also support our learners who are not able to pay. And then operationalization of our central kitchens and the logistics, and also the supply chain management, and which I still insist is through aggregators, and they buy from the smallholder farmers. So for our parents, they pay through the co-sharing fund, and providing a feeding container for the child. If a child shows up without a container, then we will not have a meal. And also the community support. So that has been important to us. However, some of the issues that we have, and some of the issues that we keep grappling with, and a lot of our teams and people out there keep asking, and what we get concerned about ourselves. So for school feeding in Kenya and probably in the region, so evidence collection, a lot of times will target just the learning and the nutrition outcomes. But we are here talking about how it is developing our SMEs economically, our smallholder farmers. So how do we collect that data, lower down in the value chain? So it is a policy challenge that probably we need to look at. And then just, looking at it from the eye of education outcomes and nutrition outcomes. How about the overall human capital development and the return on investment? So through probably a longitudinal assessment. And then we also realize that we have restricted funding models, okay? We have those that are government-led through budgeting through the exchequer. We have the community-led, and a lot of times it is just the lazy parent contribution. And someone actually said, I think it was Dr. Theo, that the fee that they pay or the levy, it is way above the fee that they're already paying in school. So it is just community-led, but how is the contribution? It is above what the parents are sometimes unable to pay. We have religious institutions, so they have been supportive. But again, we have areas where we do not have that support, and it's really skewed depending on which religion and the kind of support that they have. And then the NGOs, are they even evenly distributed? So where is the fairness again in the financing? So we need a bit of creativity around the financing so that we can ensure sustainability, because we have a goal to feed 10 million learners in this country by 2030. But if you're looking at a government that is giving 3 billion to feed the current 2.6 million, and 2030 is how many years away? It is actually 5 years away, then we're not doing very well. So the enrollment has increased, yes, but what do we do with the extra learners who've come in? So it is a strain to the existing infrastructure. So Nairobi having grown from those 40s until now, we have not seen significant improvement or expansion of the infrastructure. So it's something that we are also grappling with. So who does what? So we realize that there has to be another stakeholder. There has to be another ministry that deals with the infrastructure. There has to be another ministry that deals with those small holder farmers down there. We need financial institutions to actually support farmers to be able to produce enough of what is required, or to be able to get capital for them to be able to do sustainable agriculture. Then we have the issue of the homegrown school meals program. So we are urban, we are Nairobi. So we rely on rural agriculture for food supplies. For us, we wait for food in Marikiti in the morning, we wait for food in City Park, we wait for food in all our markets so that we can be able to buy. And everyone wants to buy. If you are doing a school feeding program, you definitely want to buy the food at the best price. So where are we sourcing the food from? So if we are not able to grow because it is homegrown, so how do we support the rural agriculture so that we ensure that we have cheaper food supplies coming to us? Okay, how do we have specialized or farmers who are targeted and probably who sign up to produce for school feeding programming so they can be given agricultural subsidies to be able to produce cheaper food? So that is really food for thought. And then the school feeding models, we have everything contextualized. I would agree with Emmanuel that we need to bring everyone on board. We need to decentralize, and we need to do this and that. But tell me about a sub-county as small as Makadara that has 29 public schools, and each of them has to build infrastructure for a kitchen and employ staff to do the school feeding program, instead of having that centralized so that we can be able to use the resources for doing other work. For us, the centralization actually promotes standardization. We are able to check for quality control. While we know it is huge, we have just started. As we move on, probably as the numbers increase, we may think about now probably doing regional, like regional models that are going to work for each and every context. But for now, working for us is actually the standardized model. There is a challenge of targeting vulnerable children, yet nutrition is a basic right. I know His Excellency, the Governor of Nairobi keeps saying, there is no hunger that is more for one tribe than the other. The hunger of Kamau is the same hunger that Anyango has. So there is no hunger for a rich person or a rich child and poor child. So we need to target all children with school feeding programs. We do not need to target vulnerable children. So this is a policy issue, something that has actually been coming on and on, that it's a safety net, it is a what. But then what we have realized is that each and every child actually deserves a school meal. And then when we have the children in school, when children gather in school, we can be able to target them for other interventions. School-going children do not come to a child welfare clinic. You will not see them. They will not come to the health facility for anything unless they are very, very sick. So we also need to learn to incorporate other interventions, not necessarily health, but also other interventions around farming, around kitchen gardening, around small animal farming, so that the children can acquire skills that they can also use at the home front. So these are some of the interventions that we integrate with Ishina County, and they come from the National School Health Policy. And so while the 5 shillings per current contribution may actually seem pretty cheap, we have parents who are not able to pay that, okay, for one reason or another. We have children who are orphaned, and probably even the person who is taking care of them is not even willing to pay the 5 shillings. So sometimes we have to look for alternative sources of paying the 5 shillings. The increased enrollment overstretching the general infrastructure, I've talked about it. And then the central kitchen infrastructure that is going to actually cater for the ever expanding population. So while the children increase, we need more classes, we need more kitchens, we need, of course, more food, and we need more and more and more of everything. And of course, more money is required. And probably we need increased coverage of public schools. So I would love the team that is supporting the informal settlement to actually negotiate for establishment of public institutions so that we can even ensure quality education is actually happening there. So on the 1st of March this year, it was the African Day of School Feeding, and the theme was A Decade of Nourishment, celebrating the past and securing a just future. So what is the just here? What is justice? So first, we know that nutrition is a basic right for each and every child. So school feeding programs promote equity and reduce education inequalities. And we know that they're not just meals, they're economic drivers for development of future human capital. So thank you very much. And I will end there. And so your questions are welcome. Asante.
Thank you so much, Esther. Clearly, from what you presented, it's a testament that governments are there and available to actually create a system that provides meals for children within these urban settlements, and also creating those economic opportunities for your farmers, your aggregators, to ensure that we are implementing a model that is, a homegrown school feeding model that works. So because we are over time, I know we were to stop at around 4:30. I will give around 2 to 3 minutes of Q&A, and I know there are quite a number of questions directed to you, Esther, especially. So I will pick on specifically someone who had raised their hand on the chat, and I will allow you to speak. This is Eric Simba. So if you're still there, I will pick on you to ask your question, because I know you put your hand up quite a while ago. But Esther, I think there's a question that has resonated on the chat that I think would be key to respond to, and I know you have touched on it in your presentation. This is specifically around quality. So, I think this is Elizabeth, of course, and I think Crispus Kinua, who are asking these two questions. One major thing is around quality of what is being sourced, the grain that is being sourced for consumption. And there's a question around especially imports of rice, where local options are more expensive. Is there quality assurance when it comes to sourcing of grain, specifically rice, for these school feeding programs, specifically under the mega kitchen model? So Esther, if you could respond to that. It has come in around twice from the participants.
Okay, thank you, Brenda, for that question around sourcing. So for us, when we talk about the dry foods, so first we source rice, we source beans, and we source grain grams. We have two types of grain grams that we use. We have the type of dengu that comes from Busia, and we have the type of dengu that comes from Kambani. You have specifically asked about the rice. Me and you buy rice in our households, and we go to the market and buy rice. If you're buying rice from where? Right now, I would buy rice at about 100 and probably 50 shillings at wholesale price. When you are cooking such rice for a team of more than 300,000 hungry mouths, then that is quite a lot of rice. When we talk about the rice that we use for the school feeding program, there is something about the quality and the cooking of it and how it comes out. There's rice that you're going to cook that is actually going to be soggy, and it will all be mushy. So there's been testing that has been done, and so far, what we are cooking and the quantities that we are actually cooking, we have not been able to source that locally. Local sourcing is actually pretty expensive because of the prices that are local. One thing that we've always discussed, and something that I mentioned, it's about subsidizing the production of food targeted for school meals. If you're to get a quality of rice that can cook and come out without being mushy, and it can be served in huge quantities, then that is something that we can actually partner with probably the agriculture team and the agriculture sector to come up with a grain that can be able to be cooked in bulk, and it's not going to be mushy. The challenge with local is about the pricing, and it's about the quality, which if we are to maintain it at the level that we are, the amount of money that we are charging, then we cannot be able to charge that based on the pricing that is local. And so when someone say that we're importing rice, yes, we're importing rice because the amount of rice that we use is pretty huge. Because we cook almost a ton of rice in each of our kitchens every day. Okay, so imagine if we are doing those many tons of rice every day and we are not able to source that, or we are, if we did that from where, maybe we would exhaust their supplies within a few months. So we do not have the quantity of rice in country that we can be able to use for dishing accounting.
Well, I think that is an eye-opener when you speak of if we are to scale, which is I think a question I also saw on the chat. If you're to scale this to other counties to have a similar model where we have our central kitchens, the dynamics of actually sourcing for grain or your cereals needs to come into question around, do we have local capacity to actually supply? And if we are to build a local capacity, what does that look like in terms of quality and supply? So I think with that, in the interest of time, I would like to actually bring the panel discussion to a close. We've had quite a number of insightful comments coming in and views from our expert panel. So I'd like to officially thank our panelists for taking the time to actually share with us the work they do in their different contexts. Thank you, Dr. Theogene. Thank you, Melaku, Dr. Jacqueline Kungu. Thank you so much, Ricky Aguda, Emmanuel, and also Esther Mokusu. Thank you so much for taking the time to share with us what your thoughts are. I think what I am walking away with largely is that there is power in the collective. We all have to work together. School feeding is a multi-sectoral aspect. There needs a multi-sectoral approach to ensure that school feeding works. We need policy support, we need government support, because the government and national structures are the underlying framework that will allow for an enabling environment for school feeding to thrive. And largely, school feeding, again, is not only about school meals provisioning, but also provides a conduit for food systems transformation, be it nutrition, be it climate change, be it enhancing the economic structures or abilities of our farmers and SMEs is very key. And again, community ownership is key for sustainability. So as we come to a close of our webinar, again, a reminder that this is part of a series of webinars that will be happening across the year. So be tuned and just follow APHRC LinkedIn pages to see what the next webinars will be focused on. And we'll be looking at other contexts of different countries to learn more about school feeding and what breeds success in school feeding programs. So with that, I'd like to bring this to a close. Thank you so much for the participants who've been able to join. I know a number of questions are still on the chat, so I'm hoping most have been responded to. And if not, I think we'll find a structure to provide those responses informally. So with that, thank you so much to our panelists. Thank you to our participants. And of course, this has only been through IDRC's generous funding to actually be able to do our research project, which is focused on leveraging school feeding and micro small enterprises. So a big thank you to also the IDRC team for this funding to enable us carry out this research project. So again, thank you so much, and stay tuned for the webinars that are coming up across the year. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. Thanks,
Thank
Brenda.
you very
Thanks,
much.
everyone.
Have a great evening.
You too. Bye.